Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 1st of March of 2024. Today we have lots of very interesting updates and details, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about some very important political events. Let's talk about the Northern America, and let's start first from Canada. According to information we have, Canada open to sending non-combat troops to Ukraine as instructors. More countries support non-combat missions. This is a very important update because right before we start making the video, we got another report from France as well. They also are planning to send some forces, and let's say in the morning, during the first half of the day, we got reports about sending also non-combat troops to Ukraine from France, but later we got updates that France is going to send special forces to force the Russians to make a decision always when the Russian attack Ukraine, to make a decision to attack the positions of France troopers or not. So this is like the Western countries don't have air defense forces, or it's very cheap to very expensive to use them, so that's why they took a decision to use France soldiers and Canada soldiers and as a man shield to protect, I don't know, power plants, energy facilities by the bodies of the soldiers of these Western countries. Furthermore, we got once again a report from the Lloyd Austin, the head of Pentagon. The defeat of Ukraine would threaten a direct military clash between Russia and NATO. That was his words. And when talking about these words, the Russians deputy responded to them immediately, saying that NATO can expect the fate of Ukraine if they continue their aggressive policy. The head of the State Duma Military Committee, Kartapolov. As we discussed, this is a very strong words, and even let's say a year ago, or I'm not talking about 5 or 10 years ago, the Russians wouldn't dare to talk like that with the United States of America, and now we see that the Russians don't care about anything, and anybody who talks about them, they can respond to anybody fast, immediately, and not just with words, because today, for example, the Russians published another video of the use or test of Yars system strategic. This is Yars system, strategical carrier of a nuclear weapon. Putin a few days ago promised to show this type of weapon to the worldwide, and now he follows his promise, and Russians published us this video. So this probably, let's say, additional response to not just to the Lloyd Austin, but also to Emmanuel Macron. This is a very powerful and dangerous weapon for you to know. Now let's back to Western countries as well, to Washington. We have another additional very important report updates. The Wall Street Journal published today the document from 2022 reveals Putin's punishing terms for peace. Draft peace deal drawn up shortly after Russia's invasion shown Ukraine was confronted with becoming a neutered state. So according to the Wall Street Journal, there was just few questions from the Russian side not to join NATO. There was a potential, let's say, chances to join European Union. So the Russians didn't talk like, no, we are not agree Ukraine to join European Union. The only thing we need is not joining of NATO. The neutral status, Crimea remaining unconditional Russian control, the future of Lugansk People Republic and let's say Donetsk People Republic to be determined in personal negotiations between Zelensky and Putin. So those agreements were very favorable in Ukrainian favor, and there was a few other things like to reduce the number of forces, to limit the number of troopers, tanks and missiles, to limit the let's say missiles range just 40 kilometers, and there was another important request from the Russian side to allow Russian language to be the second language, the government language, and to use the language in some official papers like in courts, maybe in other spheres, but Ukrainians refused everything. And now we see what we see. We see the fate of Ukraine. The fate of Ukraine that, according to the Russians, NATO will also face if they'll start any aggression against Russian Federation or will enter the western part of Ukraine. Now let's back to Macron. Once again, according to some ministers of France, today they reported that France is not going to send Ukraine soldiers to Ukraine to fight, to die for Ukraine. You know that from this perspective, he is right. He is right. France is, you might say that that Macron is saying that he will send, some ministers are saying that they are not going to send. You need to understand that France will never send their soldiers to die for Ukraine. France will send their soldiers to die for France. Obviously, they will try to find their own and to reach their own goals on the territory of Ukraine. Probably they will get some territory under control for investments, for controlling, like the Germany was split after the Second World War. Probably the Western countries have already cut Ukraine into many pieces and as areas of responsibility. Furthermore, we got additional update from the Netherlands. Today they signed the security agreement for the next 10 years. Ukraine will receive everything they want. They will receive weapons, money, support, supply, and so on. From the other side, we got some reports from Hungary, time placed in Russian favor as Prime Minister of Hungary. This is like from another side, he's completely correct, because the Russians, regarding the losses, regarding the situation, are getting stronger and stronger. And the longer the Russians are fighting with Ukraine without involvement of NATO, the biggest distance between NATO forces and Russian forces we can see. From the other side, we got a report from Czech Republic. Nobody is going to send forces to Ukraine. But probably the most important updates, as usually these days, are coming from the Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor. Today we got a report that we must prevent the escalation of the war between Russia and NATO. That was his words, and we understand that he doesn't want this conflict to finish, to continue. But from the other side, we got another report that today the Russian journalist published the transcript of a conversation among high-ranking German officers discussing an attack on the Crimean bridge. This is a very big crisis. This is a very big conflict, and this is the main evidence of that German forces were involved in the conflict in Ukraine and took, let's say, a straight participation in the targeting of the Russian objects and so on. But this is not the most important part. This is not the most important part. I'll try to explain you what is the most important from this publishing. I'll remind you that just yesterday we got update from the same Olaf Scholz. He was talking that German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has revealed that British military personnel have been sent to Ukraine as a part of highly classified missions to aid Ukrainian forces in operating British Storm Shadows missiles against Russia. That was his words yesterday, and he was blaming, or he was telling that United Kingdom was responsible for all those attacks that took place yesterday. And today we got from the Russian journalist that is very linked and very close to Putin, let's say to Russian authorities, that German also took part in those attacks. So if you ask my opinion, the Russians not just wanted to show that Olaf Scholz was lying or something like this. The main important thing that the Russians got that information obviously from London. So Olaf Scholz blamed London. London sent information to Russia, and the Russians shown this information to the world. Obviously, I'm not saying we can't see this for sure, but obviously there is a very, very big conflict between London, Paris, and Berlin about the situation in Ukraine. Very big conflict, and as you can see, London and Paris are fighting, are against Scholz. And the question I have, I understand what London and Paris are planning and want to achieve in this situation, but what is the goals of Berlin? What is his idea? What does he want? I don't know, because when talking about the conflict, according to words, Paris and London want to continue the special military operation and want to send forces to Ukraine. But when talking about the military support, Germany is the only country from all these countries who continue sending Ukrainians, let's say, the forces, ammo depots, munition, and different things to fight with the Russians. But when talking about words, Germany wants to finish the conflict and not to get another escalation. So very difficult. And once again, according to information we have, we just received from Le Monde, the France paper, Paris considering the possibility to send not just non-combat forces but special forces and other, let's say forces to and use them as the body shields of the main strategical objects during the Russian attacks. So no air defense, but French soldiers probably is going to be a very best man shield to protect Ukrainian infrastructure, or maybe the warehouses with Storm Shadows, or maybe Abram tanks. Maybe they're planning to put French soldiers on the Abram tanks, and this will reduce the level of destroyed type of this type of weapon. Who knows what is going to be and what is the purposes of the Western countries. Now let's move back to Ukraine. We got a lot of very interesting details. Today we are talking about storm shadows. London is blaming Germany. Berlin is blaming London. And today the Ukrainians made another attack with significant number of aircrafts against Crimea. Probably the Ukrainians were trying to hit and destroy the Crimean bridge, but according to the Russian sources, the Russians managed to destroy every single missile that was launched in direction of Crimea. For now, we don't have any updates from Ukraine, because if you remember the last time the Ukrainians conducted another attack, the Russians also reported they managed to shut down everything, and they was very successful, but later we got report of destroyed Russian ship or something like this. So for now we need to wait because if the Ukrainians manage to get something, probably very soon today they're going to publish additional footage or photo or video. But the Russians have already reported about the results of Ukraine attack. During that attack, according to the Russians, the Ukrainians lost 2 aircrafts. The Ukrainians lost 1 MiG-29 and one Su-24, the carrier of Storm Shadow missile and just the protector. So we'll see what is going to be next. Now we're moving to the situation on the ground, and the most important updates are coming probably from Mykolaiv. As you can see, there was a very long operational pause, and it's not a correct sentence to say that there is an operational pause, because if you follow different military analysts, they are saying that currently there is operational pause on the territory of Ukraine. The Russians are trying to attack to the west of Avdiivka. We don't have any updates about further progress and so on. From Telegram post, yes, there is a tactical or operational pause, but when talking about the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation report, today the Ukrainians lost during the previous 24 hours 1,245 soldiers. This is the second day of the 2024 of such a heavy losses. The previous one was yesterday, 1,325, and today is the second place, 1,245. Very heavy losses, and when talking about Avdiivka direction, 520 soldiers. So according to the Ministry of Defense report, there is no operational pause. But as I understand, this is the vital question, this is the decisive moment when the Ukrainians and the Russians are having clashes, and for now nobody, neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians, want to publish information, because the results of the battle hasn't been let's say determined yet. So everything is resolving right now on the ground, but in a day or in a two we're gonna receive the broken moment, and then somebody, either the Russians or the Ukrainians, will publish the first updates of the results of clashes. And according to my understanding, the Russians will publish this information, because today we got the first report from Mykolaiv with the flag. No, the second one. On this video we can see the Russian flag in the southern part, to the south of this Timiryazeva Street. The Russians established, and they're saying that farms and Timiryazeva Street are under a complete Russian control. Later we got the longest version of the same video from different fighters, Russian flags somewhere in the basements. We need to note a few things about this video. For example, if we compare this video with establishing of the Russian flag, and let's compare this video with the Russians establishing flag on the western outskirts of Stepova that took place a few days ago. This is the video. The difference between these two videos is that the Russians in Mykolaiv were making all the things with flags somewhere in the inside of the building. They were very afraid of getting out of the building because of risks of being attacked by the Ukraine FPV drones. And when talking about the western part of Stepova, probably this guy was very, let's say, comfortable. He knew for sure that there are no Ukrainians in this area, that this area was cleared and secured, and that Ukrainians are very far from the western outskirts of Stepova. Once again, about Mykolaiv, very likely that at 10 or 20 meters, let's say, from the territory, there were Ukrainians with mortars, snipers maybe. So the situation wasn't very comfortable and very secured, which confirms that line of combat contact goes something like this that you can see right now on the map. And also we got the Lancet strike, let's say 500 meters from this area, which also confirms that the Russians managed to establish control over the southern part, over the eastern part, but no progress deep inside of the Mykolaiv itself. But anyway, this is the progress. The Russians managed to dig in deeper, and now it's just a waste of a matter of time when they're able to move further. And we got from the north in direction another Lancet strike, which confirms that very likely the farms to the north still under Ukrainian control, because let's say we had one video from this direction. That was the video first flag, and the first flag the Russians established. Let's take a look at Lancet strike. The first flag the Russians established here at the beginning of the storming operation, but after that they haven't managed to move further. So before the next video we will change the map, and we will show this this territory under complete Ukrainian control. Now we are moving further to the Krasnogorovka. We got some confirmed reports about Russian offensive operation, the second assault, but yet we haven't received in a single geolocations or additional reports. The last report about Krasnogorovka we got at 11 a.m. of the local time. Later we haven't received anything. Now we are moving to Nivoyska. As we discussed, according to different mappers, the Russians moved further to the village. They managed to establish control over additional, let's say, tree lines and to get as close as possible to the village itself. But later, during the day, we haven't received any additional updates about further progress. Now we're moving to Avdiivka battle. Few important things about the territory. The Russians once again continue publishing updates about full control of the village without any geolocated confirmations either of Orlovka, Berdichi and Toninka. About Toninka, we got just one geolocation of multi-launch rockets, the bombing of the western edge of the village, which confirms that very likely the western part still under Ukraine control. On the military summary map, you can find this area in the gray zone, but obviously there are very heavy clashes. Once again, according to the Ministry of Defense report, the Ukrainians lost 400 soldiers. On Avdiivka direction 520 soldiers, so the clashes are very heavy. The Ukrainians are not counting their losses, trying to send as many as possible to slow down the Russian progress. Important thing from this area is that the Russians move their artillery focus further to the second defense belt. As we discussed, the first defense belt has been collapsed by the Russians. It's Semyonovka, Berdichi, Orlovka and Umanskaya area, and the Russians are about to finish the clearing of this territory, maybe one day, 2 or 3 or week. And now the Russians move their focus further to the second defense belt that goes from Ocheretyne, Solovyovo, Novosilovka, Persha and Karlovka Reservoir. On this video we see how the Russians were suppressing Ukrainian artillery with Lancet. So they suppressed a few artillery positions and another one to the north closer to Solovyovo. So these two videos confirms that the Russians are moving further, their artillery further focused to the west, and currently there is a stage of counter-artillery duels. Now we are moving further to Bakhmut, Artyomovsk direction. Before that, another important video that I would like to discuss with you. Let's take a look at this video on Donetsk, Avdiivka direction. On this video we can see the operating of 6 Russian aircrafts, Su-25 storming aircrafts that were supporting probably the Russian offensive in the vicinity of Avdiivka. 6 aircrafts at the same time. Just imagine the aircraft pressure. There are 2 let's say aircrafts on the horizon. Then the first pair bypassed the author of the video, and after that the second pair bypassed the same author of the video. So 6 aircrafts, and this is the reason why the Russians managed to achieve significant results, because there is endless process of pummeling of Ukrainian positions on Avdiivka direction. When talking about Bakhmut, Artyomovsk area, we continue receiving updates from Ivanovskaya. Different mappers shown, let's say, the progress in the area based on some, let's say, updates from the ground, sources on the ground, but obviously nobody has any real, let's say, insights with the geolocated videos. And according to most of the mappers, this is currently the progress of the Russians on this area. For now, we're not going to update the map. We need more evidence of the progress because there are very heavy clashes, and furthermore, some sources have already reported about the Russians' complete control of the village. So we need to be very careful with the area and to wait a little bit more. Anyway, as we can see, most of the mapper shows that the Russians reached the line, but they still haven't entered Shirokaya Street, the street that is under complete fire and complete visual control from the hill. The Ukrainians control the territory, and once again, until the Russians take this territory, the Ukrainians will feel themselves more or less comfortable in defense operation. When talking about the main defense belt along Chasiv Yar, the Russians published a series of videos of FPV drone strikes against the Ukrainian forces, which confirms the line of combat contact and that there are still Ukrainians and that there are still very heavy fortification area. The same story on the northern part along the railways. The Russians continue storming the territory with FPV drones without any additional movements on the ground. Just regular activity, FPV drone hunting, significant losses, but no changes on the ground. When talking about Siversk direction, before Siversk, another important update. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians conducted successful ballistic attack in Konstantinovka. There were 4 missile strikes. As a result of those strikes, the Russians destroyed 1 hospital, and in the area, the Russians destroyed the buildings of police department and the special forces department, and the Russians destroyed destroyed some industrial, let's say, company from industrial zone. 4 strikes. Very likely there were very heavy casualties among the Ukrainians, but for now we don't have any updates about that. When talking about Siversk, no changes in the area. South and Kupiansk direction as well, no changes, and the northern as well. The only important update from the northern direction is that Ukrainians during the previous months managed to restore another, let's say, pontoon bridge. The Russians, as soon as the Ukrainians restored the pontoon bridge, the Russians destroyed the bridge. And this is a very important piece of news because the Ukrainians, as you can see, at the same area managed to build probably the same place of up to 5 or 6 bridges. All of them were destroyed during the previous phases, but we need to understand that nobody destroyed the bridge, let's say, for nothing. You destroyed the bridge, the Ukrainians will restore the bridge within the next few days, or 3 or 5 days. It's important to destroy the bridge every time you're planning to renew offensive, because if you, let's say, break the logistic and there is no bridge, the Ukrainian logistic chains will be destroyed and they will be forced to find another solutions, and of course it will increase the Ukrainian problems. So that's why during this process it's the best time to launch an offensive while there is the problems with logistic. So based on that, we can make a conclusion that very soon the Russians may try to attack once again Sinkovku and Kupiansk from the north, or maybe Tabaevka and Kotlarovka area due to Ukrainian problems in logistics. So I expect updates of this type in the very near future. And once again, I'll remind that currently the Ukrainians are trying to build defense belt around Kharkiv and Kiev, which is very important because as we see, very likely the conflict is going to be, very big conflict is going to be. And if France and Canada send their forces, obviously the question of big war is not the question of whether this war is going to be or not. It's just a question of time. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.